All right, I just did about an hour and 45-minute live stream following the park fire, basically just trying to figure out what's going on the ground as best as we can based on the limited information that we have. But I know nobody has the time to watch an hour and 45-minute video, so I thought I would just condense and try to be more concise and basically say all the most important information that we learned and hopefully a 10 to 15-minute video. So right off the bat, this shows what the last 3 hours have looked like on the park fire, and you can see it's clearly the most active wildfire that we've had this entire year, and I would actually go as far to say as it's the most extreme wildfire that I think I've forecasted for in my 5 years of doing this. In the past, I would maybe put that at the Dixie fire or the Caldor fire, but this one, as you can see, in about 24 hours grew more than 100,000 acres. It's now up to 125,000 acres. If we actually measure the fire itself, just based on the perimeter, keep in mind that it's actually grown more than what you can actually see right here. That is 20 miles of growth in one day. I believe it was the Dixie fire. I remember there was 15 miles of growth in one day. And then on top of that, it's also near a large amount of structures, and that's actually the main concern with this fire. So looking at the park perimeter, that's actually not the most recent one that we have. The more recent one is shown on the Watch Duty app, and we'll definitely be talking about this, especially that finger stretching out that you see right there. That actually matches up with the video that I showed at the beginning of this live stream. One other thing you could clearly see on this is all of the different aircraft that are out there at the moment. And CAL FIRE did pull together a lot of resources in just 24 hours. We already have 1,000 personnel on this fire, and I would say the most aircraft that I've ever seen on a fire. Now, before I get more into the details, first thing that I should have said is there are a large number of evacuation orders and warnings in place right now. Anywhere where you see the red, that means it's an order, and that means leave immediately. Yellow basically means get ready to leave. I never go through those in these videos, though, because by the time some people are watching this, these have most likely changed. So, yeah, just stay updated with the local information there. But now let's try to figure out kind of where we are, get our bearings. So here's the park fire. Here's Chico down towards the left. We have Paradise over to the right. We have Forest Ranch. That's this cluster of structures. And then Cohasset is this cluster of structures. And that was the main, or maybe still is the main area of the fire that I have the most concern over, because you can see how the fire perimeter just goes right against those structures. And then the most recent growth seems to be directly between these two clusters of structures. Although the most active part of the fire is this southeastern, pretty much this whole southeastern section right here. And that is something that we can see on the satellite heat imagery. That darker color is basically where the fire has burned previously, and it looks like it just updated, so we're going to have the most recent information to come off of. So that dark is where the fire burned. It actually started towards the south around 3 p.m. yesterday afternoon. It was maybe 1,500 acres yesterday evening. And then overnight, we had strong southerly winds around 25 miles per hour that just rapidly pushed this up towards the north. When I woke up this morning, I believe the fire was already at 45,000 acres. So it grew more than 40,000 acres overnight, which is something you don't often see on wildfires. Usually overnight is when things cool down, you got more moisture in, your winds calm down. But one station I looked at midnight, it was still 78 degrees. Relative humidity was in around 30%. We had 28 mile per hour wind gusts, and that basically just rapidly pushed this fire towards the north. Now what we're seeing now is even more activity as we've gotten into the afternoon hours, because this afternoon, if we look at some of the conditions we had out there, we'll just click this random station, shows max temp around 94, which is hot. Minimum relative humidity around 14%. That's about as dry as you're ever going to see. And the drier your air is, the drier your fuels get. And then the drier your fuels get, the faster your fire can spread, just because it doesn't have to waste any of its energy evaporating the moisture out of the plants. Right when it gets to that vegetation, it's just ready to combust. So it's been hot, it's been dry, and then I'd say the number one factor on this fire has been the wind. And what's interesting is it actually looks like it's shifted direction a bit. So last night, the wind was mostly coming from the south-southeast, and that's why a lot of our growth was towards the north-northwest. But if you look at the direction the smoke is moving now, it actually looks like most of that smoke is moving towards the northeast at the moment. Now that might not make a lot of sense, but it does start to make more sense when we think, or we zoom in to this little finger right here. So the reason I'm focusing on that, well, there's a couple reasons, but first one is that you can kind of see that this fire is split in two. You have this northern edge of the fire that is moving off towards the north. And the reason I don't have as much concern about that area of the fire is because up towards the north, you don't see nearly as many structures up there. So that's going to just start burning into the wilderness at this point. It's on this eastern side of the fire where you see the largest amount of structures. And that's actually the part of the fire that appears to be the most active recently. See how bright that orange color is, how much smoke is coming off of the fire? And the fact that it's going towards the northeast would mean that this part of the perimeter would be going directly towards these clusters of structures. Now, that sounds pretty alarming until we match it up with this map right here. This is the Watch Duty app, and it's a little hard to see. There's a lot going on at first, so we'll just zoom way in here first. And we've seen a lot of aircraft just going non-stop on this section of the fire down. This is like the very southern edge down here. I did see one report that it actually got over 32 at one point, but then they dropped 2 retardant drops on it. And then it seems like they've brought it back to the western side. And a lot of these aircraft have just been hitting the same point over and over again. I believe just trying to keep it on the western side of 32. And if we zoom throughout the fire perimeter, it does seem, based on this, that it is still on the western side of 32. Now if we zoom in here, you can also see that the most recent fire perimeter just goes around Cohasset right there. You can see where the streets are zooming in. You can see where there's maybe some structures in here. That's going to be these structures right along the perimeter right there. And then Forest Ranch is going to be these structures over towards the east here. Now what's the most important thing to look at, because a lot of times these heat detections overestimate where the fire has actually been because it's picking up on some of the heat that's in the smoke plume. But that fire perimeter looks like it stretches kind of perfectly between where you see Forest Ranch on the map right there and then kind of this canyon. Now it's maybe hard to see that canyon at first. So what we're going to do is actually zoom in here. See this video where we showed basically the rotating smoke plume? That's the canyon. You could think of Forest Ranch as over on this eastern side of the fire because we're actually looking down at the fire from this angle. So showing it on the map, here's the camera up here, Platte Mountain. Here's Forest Ranch. And one of the Watch Duty updates said that the fire was basically ripping up Big Chico Creek. So you see this creek in here? There's that canyon. And then on this side we have Musty Buck Ridge. And then Cohasset Ridge over here. And then you can just think of it as Big Chico Creek at the bottom of this canyon. Winds rushing up this canyon, pushing the fire towards the northeast, which makes sense why our smoke is now going towards the northeast during the afternoons. Winds get funneled up canyons, and that seems to be exactly what's happening here. Forest Ranch on the eastern side of this canyon, that's going to be all of those structures right there. And then that finger pushing up directly, basically where this camera is pointed. So keeping all of that in mind, now let's go back to the camera and see what it has looked like over the last 3 hours, keeping all of that in mind. So there's the ridge. Cohasset's going to be on the other side of that ridge. Kind of hard to see what's going on up there. Then we have the winds rushing up the canyon this direction. You can see how much power is coming off of this fire, a lot of rising motion. And then when you get that much rising motion, basically what's happening here, I can actually draw on this, you get all of this fuel here that hasn't been burnt out in decades. It's dry right now. It's hot, dry, and windy as well. And then you get those up canyon winds. You're going to get a lot of rising motion right here. And what's going to happen is you can't just have a vacuum at the surface, so you need air rushing in to take its place. But if you have some air rushing in that's a little bit faster than the other air, then what's going to happen is it's actually going to start to rotate. And that is exactly what we can see right here with that rotation as this smoke plume travels up the canyon. So now we can basically match that up once again with that finger going just to the west of Forest Ranch right there. And then we can also even look at it from a different view. So, not sure what's going on right there. So coming back right here, let's go show on map. Now let's actually look at it from the south. So this is going to be Doe Mill Road, and instead of looking down at the smoke plume, we're going to be looking up at it. So Doe Mill Road down here. Again, here's our canyon in there. There's Big Chico Creek. That it seems like the fire is going directly along that path. And we are going to look at the Doe Mill Road camera over the last, we'll go 3 hours. And you can basically see it ripping up towards the north in that canyon that we were looking at from the other angle previously. And there you see that rotation from kind of a different angle right there. So basically, the information that we've gathered right there is that the fire does appear to be extending in this direction right now. But based on the information that we've been able to acquire as of right now, it looks like it has remained out of the Forest Ranch community for the time being. Notice how that perimeter doesn't actually extend into the streets or cross 32 right there. It seems to still be to the west, but that's definitely still the part of the fire that I'm the most concerned about, as well as Cohasset, which right here it looks like it's been overwhelmed by the fire, but again, those heat detections always overestimate how much the fire has actually grown. So now the question would be, what's going to happen from here on out? Well, based on the wind forecast, this is actually a bit concerning because as we go to 11 p.m., instead of the winds dying down like they should at nighttime, it actually just looks like they're going to be just as strong, if not even stronger than they were last night. One piece of maybe good news is that it does look like the winds are going to be more southeasterly. So what that's going to do is try to, or hopefully, just push the fire back into itself. And that would be the best situation for us on the southeastern edge. If we get more of a southeasterly wind that basically pushes the fire back into where the fuels have already been burnt out, and then it loses a lot of steam. That would be good news for us there. Northern edge, I expect that to just continue to grow because when we look at fire history, not a lot of fuels have been burnt out on that northern side. Actually, not on this eastern side either. So we have fuels that haven't been burnt in decades. Even where we do have a burn scar, the 2013 Deer Fire, looks like the perimeter is going right through there. So we must have had enough fuel grow over the last 11 years that that burn scar is not really helping us out. So there's a lot of fuel still to burn up here. We're still going to see strong southerly winds overnight, so that's going to continue to push the fire towards the north. It does look like the winds slightly calm down tomorrow morning, but then unfortunately it actually looks like tomorrow afternoon is going to be even windier than we were throughout the day today. So that's why we do have a red flag warning over this fire, at least the last time I checked through Friday night, and then it looks like things will finally start to calm down a bit more overnight on Friday into Saturday. So basic prediction there, we're going to continue to see activity on the park fire, especially on the northern side. The main area that I'm concerned about is still that southeastern finger that is closest towards the largest number of structures right here. And then with the strong winds continuing overnight, definitely going to have to keep a close eye on this, not only overnight tonight, but even through tomorrow afternoon as well, as conditions remain hot, dry, windy. And I mean, like I said, I believe this is the most maybe intense wildfire that I've ever covered, and I've been doing this for about 5 years. Never seen 20 miles of growth in one day. And unfortunately, the day's not done yet. Every time I look at this acreage, it continues to increase. If we need a silver lining, as of right now, I mean, based on the information that I've been able to find, it doesn't look like it's gone through some of the communities that we're able to actually see here. But again, I can't really confirm anything. I can only go off of the best information I've found. So definitely take all the evacuation orders and warnings seriously. And I will definitely have more updates for you tomorrow based on kind of what happens overnight and what we can expect for the future. So stay tuned. Hopefully this video was helpful, and thanks for watching.